Bible itself, and I have to say that because that's a very uncommon thing in the religious community. When I was attending a Thursday morning Bible study with the Baptist Church in Martinsville, I'd go Thursday mornings at 10, and it would be more discussion from a particular commentary that the teacher had, and if you asked him a question, he almost, I'm not trying to be ugly, it was just the factual statement. He was hardly ever prepared to field questions, and so he'd just start opening up this super thick commentary. Well, I can read that commentary at home, and I can read my Bible by myself. You're not getting real Bible information from the sectarian Bible studies. You're just getting traditional discussions. What did these people say about it? Now, as we get started this morning, we always give out our contact. My cell phone is 276-806-3641. My email address is calebgrobertson@gmail.com. I can't monkey with that. That's going to just be in the way. That's good. Thank you. calebgrobertson@gmail.com. And if you email me, then we will put you on the weekly Informer email list. And what that is a page-and-a-half Bible article. You'll get that in your email every Sunday morning. And this past week was on Romans 11:22. Is it meant to be scary for Christians, those who are actually Christians inside the body of Christ? This passage talks about the severity of God. Is that supposed to be scary for you? I don't think so. I think people who would say it is, I think they're misusing it. And we're going to have a part 2 on Romans 11:22 coming this Sunday morning. So email me at calebgrobertson@gmail.com. We'll get that to you. Anybody that you know that might be interested in it, you send me their email address, we'll get it to them also. And then, of course, if you are local and you're watching What Does the Bible Say through Star News, that's fantastic. That's how people see it locally. But if you have a cousin Ted over in Wisconsin, or we say Bob in Arkansas, whoever, you think What Does the Bible Say is good Bible information and you want your friends and family members in other places to be a part of it, then all they have to do is Google Johnny Robertson YouTube. That's a picture of my dad, Johnny Robertson. This is the purple and white Bible, What Does the Bible Say banner that they will see, and then you come down here and they'll see the watch live icon, and they can tune in and they can be watching it from wherever they might be. So we want you to be encouraged, we want you to be edified. The point of this broadcast is to help you better know your Bible. We say without moving across America, but if you are so inclined to move here, we have people on a pretty frequent basis that say they would like to move here, and then we also are in contact with different people that they have it in their plan, like they're working on moving here. In 2 Chronicles 11:14 and 2 Chronicles 15:9 is your biblical precedent for individuals who actually moved to be where faithful people were. And then the second point is we say prep you for evangelism. That's the goal. We're not accumulating Bible knowledge to make our heads bigger. We are accumulating Bible knowledge so that we are prepared to talk to people, to talk to people about the basics, what they need to know. And what we do in here through this Bible class is that I'm prepping you, trying to do my part to prep people for the things that are going to come up that are not conducive to where we're trying to make headway. And so that's the main goal, is evangelism's main goal. And we invite you to come out to the Danville Church of Christ Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. for our Bible class series, Studying Sin Seriously. This is still going. I don't know how long we've been doing it now, but there's quite a bit to talk about, what the Bible has to say about sin. And someone said, well, y'all just like doing this because you want to judge people. That's not the purpose of the class. The purpose of the class, to understand sin, is to better protect ourselves, and then we try to refrain from sin because sin hurts our lives, but also if I'm sinning, I'm probably overstepping my bounds with my fellow man, and I don't want to hurt my neighbor, so that's why we study sin. Recommended books for Old Testament, we're studying through by Isaac Garrett. I would recommend you get those and you have some good overview knowledge of the Old Testament. Now, this morning we're in the book of Judges, and we do have a special class on the book of Judges, and so I know that I teach the classes a bit differently than what some people would think, I ought to do, and it's certainly not the traditional way of doing it. I start in the back of the book sometimes, and I think that that's necessary to do. We did it in Joshua because I said if we didn't start in the back of the book, people wouldn't stick around for the back of the book. It's very important to get all that information, the layout of the land. Start in the back of Judges because really it's an appendix It's a flashback to the beginning time frame of the book of Judges. And so today we're going to be doing something a little different. This is Judges material, but it's coming from a different book. And this morning we're going to insert the book of Ruth. Now, I told somebody this plan, and when I said, Wednesday morning I'm going to be doing the book of Ruth, and their comment was, why would you be doing the book of Ruth? You're in Judges. And then they just started saying stuff about, you don't even finish a book. You just teach to a certain point, then move on. You're already in the book of Ruth. And just went on and on and on. And in that conversation, I said, you're proving my point as to why I'm doing the book of Ruth this way. And y'all, I am continuing what that person said. They did not know why I would do the book of Ruth. What did we do last week? We did chapters 4 and 5 of the book of Judges. I just don't understand why you're going to do the book of Ruth. It's proving my point. And we're going to continue to prove this point as we go along, and that is 1 Corinthians 8, number 2. Verse number 2. If any man think that he knoweth anything, he knoweth nothing yet as he ought to know. Do you get what he's saying? So, it's a good quote. I don't agree with the person who made the quote. But they said the challenging thing about life is accumulating enough knowledge to think that you know about a subject, but then not knowing that you still don't know enough. Does that make sense? When I always say you can't know what you don't know, a lot of times, y'all, we gather up information and we think, I've got that. I'm down with that. And then somebody comes along and they ask us a question that we have not even contemplated. And you know what we oftentimes do? We get mad at them. And we're not mad at them. We're aggravated at the feeling that's created in ourselves because we don't know. And that's exactly what he's saying in 1 Corinthians 8 too. What's the best approach to that? What's the best response? Don't get mad at the person because they're saying something to you that you have not thought of before. And I know that feeling. Because I've told you that story of my dad was talking old Baptist confessions with a man, and they were talking in such detail, they both knew what they were discussing as far as these confessions go. And so at some point they stopped using titles and words and they just started talking dates. Well, I had no clue what they were talking about. And when I have that feeling, I said to you, it feels like the room is getting smaller and my ears get hot. Now, what does that feeling feel like for you? When a conversation is being had and you know that you don't know what is being discussed, but you're still going to participate anyway. That's bad. That's bad Bible study. The best thing to do is just go ahead and admit that you don't know and, maybe take some time to study it. And it might be the case that you don't know about this particular topic and you might throw this at it. And I'm not opposed to this. You might say, I have not thought about that, but you might respond, I don't really see the value in thinking about it. Not everything has to be discussed. Paul said in Titus 3:9, foolish questions and genealogies and contentions and strivings about the law, for they are unprofitable and vain. Now, the apostle said some discussions are just unprofitable and vain. So you might not know something, and instead of getting mad, just say, I don't know about that. And I don't mean that in like a disagreeing way because I don't like that. I don't like when people respond to me. I don't know about that. But anyway, you might just say, I don't know. Maybe I'll look at it. Titus 3:9. Maybe I won't look at it. But that's what we're doing today. If you don't know why I'm teaching Ruth this morning, you're helping me prove my point. And to that, I say thank you. And I did want to come on this morning and really give another statement of thank you. And I've done this before, but we can do it again. I was talking with somebody yesterday. He is a brother in Christ, and he is on the I'm in Virginia, and he's on the total opposite end of the country, and he watches What Does the Bible Say on YouTube. And he watches it with his young kids. And I sent this to him, and I'm saying this to you all this morning. 1 Thessalonians 2:4, as we are allowed of God to be put in trust with the gospel, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God, which trieth our hearts. And so I do want to say, and I've said this before, but it continues to be a privilege to do this broadcast and have people interact with us, people who are interested in Bible study. I think that we are all a part of the greatest goal, which is to get people on board with the New Testament truth. I'm thrilled to death. I'm very thankful to you all who participate. Thankful to those who support the broadcast, because it does take monetary support to keep this broadcast on the air. For people who watch this and say, hey, we got to help this stay on the air, I thank you very much. And as the verse says, we're thankful to God that we even get to be a part of it. I hope you're ready for this class this morning. You have your Bible out, have your notepad ready to go. I always say this: when you watch the broadcast, it's 2 hours long. You're not gonna remember everything. So write it down on a notepad as messy as you need to do to get the important stuff down. And then after that, I encourage people to get themselves a wide margin King James Bible. Get your notepad, restudy this stuff, revisit your notes, and then neatly put it in your text. Why? Because when we leave this class and you leave your notepad, you're not going to remember this stuff then. So you need to have it written down in your Bible. Like I say, half of my brain is inside of this book. And this book in particular, because I know the page layout, and like I said, don't be swapping out Bibles all the time. I am going to know, I said till I die, I'm wedded to this thing. I know where it is on the page. If I can't remember the chapter and the verse, I know where it is on the page. Okay. Now someone might be saying, why Ruth? And I'm saying this because it's proving the point. We don't know the Old Testament text as we ought to know. And I have said before that people will say about the Old Testament, they say, well, I'm not too much of an Old Testament student, I'm more of a New Testament student. And the more you talk to them, they don't really know anything about the New Testament. And then they narrow it down and say, well, I just kind of pay attention to the life of Christ. And you talk to them about that, and they don't know anything about that either. Well, we're not going to know everything and keep everything in our memory bank all the time, but we can always do better, and that's what we're doing this morning in this Bible class. We're trying to do better. Here's the thing about Bible chronology. Number one, it is interesting. It's interesting to try to put the Bible in order, but it's not. The Bible is not written or documented for us in chronological order, and you could basically recognize that if you all would like read through Ezra and Nehemiah and recognize where it is inside of your Old Testament. That's not chronological. So sometimes we do these broadcasts and somebody says, you're supposed to finish Judges then do Ruth. Who said that? Where did you get that idea? And you say, well, a line of books, you say when I line up my books of the Bible, it's Judges then Ruth, and that's how you're supposed to do it. That's not how Bible chronology works. It's more like stacks of books that you read at the same time. Do you remember before we said like a blueprint that you have overlays? Here's the first level. Now we're going to take a leaf of it. We'll bring a new leaf in. Now you got it stacked. And so the way we have it on the screen is like you're reading Exodus. Well, really you should be reading Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers, stacking all of them, and then recognize that Deuteronomy is a book to itself. It's one solid discourse before they go into the land and right before Moses dies. But Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers are very, very much overlapping. Now let's look at this. That's really the way that you should be reading Judges. Judges, Ruth, the beginning of 1 Samuel. That's how that should be going. It's not like you go 1 through 1, 1, 2, 3, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel. These are books that are going to be happening together, and that's why I say the better way to think about Bible chronology is not a line of books on a bookshelf, but more like having a stack of books and then going in order. These all touch one another. Now here's how I prove that to you. This is very easy. 1 Corinthians 8:2, if any man think that he knows anything, he knoweth nothing yet as he ought to. This is super simple, the way that I'm going to document this. And y'all, I'm not saying it's super simple like, I'm just a master at Bible study. You can find this documented in plenty places where other people see this, and it's not like it's hidden. Very first verse of Ruth. Ruth 1, verse number 1. It came to pass in the days when the judges ruled. There was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. Right away, we now know where the book of Ruth is supposed to go. Now, I think that a lot of people look at these books and it's just like, you had Judges, years later, out of nowhere you get Ruth. You just get this random 4-chapter book and it's just kind of there. I think that's how a lot of people look at it. I think a lot of people think that it's just randomly put there because they say, well, Ruth is a love story. I think they loved one another. I don't think that it's what you guys are making it out to be. I hate to be like that. I like romance, what have you. I love love, but I just don't think that it's so much that. I think there's a greater point to be made there. So let's look at this. When the judges ruled, this is how Ruth opens up. The book of Ruth is taking place inside of the book of Judges. Well, here's a question that needs to be asked. Somebody would say, okay, we see Ruth 1:1, we get it, but how are you deciding to do it now? Right? Because we've only made it to Deborah and Barak, however you want to say his name, Barak. We've only made it to chapters 4 and 5, and you're thinking, well, now we need to put Ruth in because Ruth 1:1 just says when the judges ruled. Well, that could be anything. And if you look at Acts 13:20, it could be a 450-year window. How do you know that we shouldn't be putting it towards the end of the book? This is how. I know that I should be putting, this is how Bible study goes. Some of y'all are going to be scratching your head, but I'm saying write this down and you double check me and see if this is not right. I know that Ruth belongs at the beginning of the book of Judges by checking the back of the book of Ruth. Ruth 4, verse number 20 through 22. However you want to say these names. I'm not Hebrew and you're not either, but here we go. And Aminadab begat Nahshon. Nahshon begat Salmon. Salmon begat Boaz. Boaz begat Obed. Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David. Now, this is what we're going to key in on, is in pink, right? Salmon. Now, we just have this list here, and you know it's going to end up with David in the back of the book of Ruth, Ruth 4, 20 through 22. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach this to the genealogies that are in Matthew 1 that have to do with the genealogical table of Jesus the Christ. Matthew 1:5 says that Salmon, who begat Boaz, it says Salmon begat Boaz of Rahab, and Boaz begat Obed of Ruth, and Obed begat Jesse, and as you know from the previous text, Jesse is going to have David. So here's how I know from looking at the back of Ruth, the last chapter of the book of Ruth, I know that we should then put Ruth at the beginning of the book of Judges, within the first 4 chapters of the book of Judges. Now let's look at this. Immediately, this may not be connecting to you the way that it is, when you read it and in my head. What do you think when Salmon begat Boaz of Rahab? Where do you find Rahab? Joshua 6:25. Joshua saved Rahab the harlot alive and her father's household and all that she had, and she dwelled in Israel even unto this day, because she hid the messengers which Joshua sent out to spy out Jericho. How do you know that Ruth goes to the beginning of Judges? Because the father and mother of Boaz, who's going to be the character inside of Ruth, are when? When are they introduced to us? They're introduced to us all the way back at the beginning of Joshua. Now somebody is going to be paying attention, and I'm glad that you are, and you're going to say, well, the book of Joshua is not that long ago. That's good. That's fine. Look at this now. You have a 450-year window, Acts 13, verse number 20. That's what he says. From the conquest up to Samuel, 450 years. When you see Joshua 6, Rahab is already an adult. She's grown when the conquest is happening. And then if you look at your Bible in Ruth chapter 3, verse number 10, by the time that we're introduced to Boaz, when the judges ruled, he's said to already be an older man. Look at Ruth 3, verse number 10. And he said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, insomuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich. Now, Ruth is a widow, and she is looking for a husband. And what does he say about himself? You have shown favor to me rather than the young men. Do you see how this is working? I know that you're saying, well, this seems tedious, but it's going to matter as we continue. Ruth 3:10, Boaz is already old when we meet him. Now, if you go back in your book of Judges that we've already covered, the king of Mesopotamia comes in Judges chapter 3, Cushan Rishathaim, Judges 3:8, and he oppresses Israel for how long? 8 years. Othniel is the nephew of Caleb. He's a judge. He's the first judge that we read about. And he delivers the people, the Israelites, from the Mesopotamian oppression. How long rest do they get? 40 years rest. Then it says in Judges 3, verse number 12, the children did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord. And how long did Eglon, king of Moab, oppress them? 18 years. Ehud, the second judge, delivers the Israelites from the Moabite oppression under Eglon. And how long do they have rest? The text says in 30, so Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest 80 years. They had 80 years rest. Now here's my point. You add all that time frame up, the first 3 chapters of the book of Judges, and you got 146 years. Ruth 1:1 says that Ruth takes place when the judges ruled in Israel. When you go to the end of Ruth, Ruth 4:20 through 22, you find that the father of Boaz, the main character aside from Ruth, is Salmon. When you go over to Matthew 1:5, you find that Salmon married Rahab, and they together have Boaz. Now, if his parents were during the conquest and we're already up to 146 years, Boaz is not going beyond chapter 4. Does that make sense? Now you might be saying, what difference does this make? I am going to, at the end of the class, y'all, we're going to have a very, very big point, and we're going to make application as we go along. To read your Bible this way and really to see the interworkings is very important. And this is what I say. We do things like this in this class, and some people would be saying, well, Caleb, you're confusing me. Well, then let's take a moment and talk about this. What you can do is, if you're saying, well, Caleb, you're confusing me, is you can, if you're watching on YouTube, just rewind it and walk through this with me again. Just rewind it, go away from it, come back later, get your notes organized, and see if you can make this out. People find these type of things, it confuses them, and they just give up on Bible study. So they say, well, you know, if these folk can't get it, I'm not going to get it. That is not the way to think about your Bible study. I think the more time that we spend with it is the issue. We're not spending enough time with it. And let me just tell you something about this. If you keep cutting yourself short, you will never stop. And this is what I mean. I had a conversation with a man. He was in the Christian church, and he was a graduate of Liberty University. Now, I don't know if he actually was taking Bible at Liberty, but we were having a Bible conversation, and he's the one who threw out his Liberty education. So if it's not Bible, I don't even know why he did it. But he kept saying things to me like, well, who am I? What do I know? Blah, blah, blah. And at some point I said, man, a minute ago you're telling me you graduated from Liberty University. And I said, why did you say that if you're going to continue to cut yourself short? Like, he used that as a, hey, I know a little bit. But as his arguments weren't standing up, he then came back and said, well, what do I know? Do you see my point? You could graduate from a religious college and still be cutting yourself short. I do have to basically say, going to these religious colleges really doesn't accomplish anything. They don't really teach the Bible. If you're going to Liberty, they're going to basically teach you Baptist tradition and Baptist viewpoints, and you're going to read a lot of commentaries about the Bible written by other men. I don't really recommend any of these Bible colleges. Do you see what I'm doing here? Ruth belongs in the first 3 chapters of the book of Judges. And when we get done, I promise you there will be reasoning behind this. Now, are you with me on that? Like I said, if you don't get it, you say, I'm just not seeing it, that's fine. Just rewind it. Do your notes again. If you're somebody and you're watching on Star News and you're saying, well, he keeps saying rewind it, and I don't know if y'all can rewind Star News or not, then get your smartphone out, tablet, laptop, what have you. You go to What Does the Bible Say on YouTube. You can rewind it that way. Even if you watch on Star News in Martinsville, you could still be checking out the YouTube. So here's something else, y'all, that people just don't pay attention to, and I'm not really trying to fault anybody. I'm just saying this is just reality. You don't really know what to do with Ruth. You don't know where Ruth belongs, so you're not really even looking at Ruth. And if it's only 4 chapters long, but even still, you're probably not going to read to the end of the book of Ruth. And if you do, you're not going to spot this, and it's not going to stand out to you. And I am going to give you a reasoning as to why it stands out to us. This is going to sound foreign to you, but the end of Ruth is actually how you answer Psalm 51:5. Can I pause? You say, boy, you're taking a turn, Caleb. You went from like Bible chronology and how to make all this Bible chronology work, and now you're trying to talk to us about the man-made idea that born in sin is not a biblical idea. So you say you're taking a turn from Bible chronology, now you're going over to born in sin. You know this is how the morning broadcast goes. I wake your brain up, right? It's 10 a.m. I don't know, different retired people have different schedules. Some people still wake up super early, and I talked to a lady in Starbucks, and she was getting something, and I asked her about, have you ever tried espresso? And she said, what's that for? And I said, well, it's like when you need a kick. You know, you're in the day and you need an extra kick. She said, if I'm in the middle of the day and I need a kick, I go to bed. I'm retired. And I said something else to her, and I said, honey. She said, honey, did you not hear what I said? I'm retired. Look, we're getting our minds woke up. We're going through what we call Tid-Bits. This is a heavy tidbit, and then we're going to be getting into our points of application. But here's the thing, y'all. You've got neighbors who believe born in sin. They're Baptist, Presbyterian, Methodist, Catholic. Jehovah's Witnesses believe in born in sin. It's Lutherans born in sin, because Lutherans are just divergent Catholics. It's all over the place, so you need to know this. Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Now, I know on the front end you're going to be saying, well, this can't mean born in sin, because you're going to have multiple passages that are going to say you can't punish the child for the sins of their father. You're thinking like Ezekiel 18:20 to verse number 22, and that's correct. You're thinking of Deuteronomy, says the same thing. That's correct. But what is he saying when he says, behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and sin did my mother conceive me? I recognize that you can't have a contradiction between Psalm 51:5 and a contradiction between Ezekiel 18:20. But what is the point of what he's saying here? Now, here's what I'm saying. The end of Ruth will help you with Psalm 51:5. Look at Ruth 4, verse number 12. Now, this is at the time where Boaz marries Ruth, and they have their child together. They have Obed, right? It says they're going to have that offspring. And then in that moment, this is referenced. Let thy house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. Now, here's the thing. You're in Ruth 4. Let me turn over. You're in Ruth 4, verse number 12, and you're going to have this quotation, let thy house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of whom the seed which the Lord shall give of this young woman. Now, what is that? Who is Pharez, Tamar, and Judah? And what is the significance of this discussion? Y'all, Bible study consistently works this way. It is not that it is overly difficult. It is that we are keeping up with so much information. You're seeing the span of basically human history and how it ties into the interweaving of God giving us the Christ. For your notes, y'all, this is Genesis 38. When it came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brethren and turned into certain Adulamite, whose name was Hira, and Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua. He took her, went into her, and she conceived and bare a son, and called his name Now here's you have Judah, right? We're going to go down further. In the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. Judah was comforted and went up into his sheep shears to Timnath, he and his friend Hira the Adulamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, behold, thy father-in-law goeth up to Timnath to shear his sheep. And she put her widow's garment off from her, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, sat in an open place which is by the way to Timnath, for she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given unto him to wife. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, because she covered her face, and he turned unto her by the way, and said, go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee, for he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, what wilt thou give me, that thou mayest come in unto me? And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. And she said, what wilt thou give me a pledge till you send it? And he said, what pledge shall I give thee? And she said, thy signet, thy bracelets, and thy staff that's in thine hand. And he gave it to her, came in unto her, and she conceived by him. Judah, with his own daughter-in-law, who he just believes to be a random harlot, which you recognize that's fornication. This is not a good scene. Fornication, and she conceives. Well, we're going to go further. And it came to pass about 3 months after that it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot, and also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. And Judah said, bring her forth, and let her be burnt. And when she brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man who these are, I am with child. And she said, discern, I pray thee, whose are these, the signet and bracelets? Them and said, she hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah my son. And he knew her again no more. And it came to pass in the time of her travail, that behold, twins were in her womb. And it came to pass when she travailed, that one put out his hand, and the midwife took and bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, this came out first. And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out. And she said, how hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Pharez. Pharez is the child of Judah and Tamar, which was conceived by fornication. And Ruth 4:12 says, let thy house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. Now some of you are going to say, this is obviously the quotation. It goes back to Genesis 38. Pharez was a child born of fornication, Judah and Tamar. We're going to look at Ruth 4 and say, well, they are not fornicating, they're married. And they're having that child. What difference does that make? 1 Corinthians 8, verse number 2. Those we think we know, we don't know as we ought to know. We're learning here. That's the whole point of this class. If I say stuff in this class and I talk about y'all don't know, I'm not trying to be belittling. That's the point of this class. We're in here to grow and learn, right? But this is just how it goes. 1 Corinthians 8, verse number 2. We don't know as we ought to know. Why in Ruth 4 would they mention Pharez? Deuteronomy 23, verse number 2. So this is a time frame to educate your children. They're going to hear me read out of the text, a bastard shall not inherit the congregation of the Lord. Go ahead and tell them what that means. It is a child born outside of a marriage. It is an illegitimate child. You're going to hear that be used, just people get mad and call each other that. It has a real definition. Go ahead and tell your kids what it means so they don't think I'm up here cussing on TV. A bastard shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. Even to his 10th generation shall he not enter into the congregation of the Lord. Deuteronomy 23, 2. In your notes now, here we are. Ruth 4:12. And then if you want to do arrows, like if you want to make a flow chart. Ruth 4:12, arrow to Psalm 51:5, arrow to Deuteronomy 23:2. An illegitimate child shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even unto his 10th generation. Now let's look at this, y'all. We're going back to Matthew chapter 1. Matthew 1, verse number 3 through 6. Judah begat Pharez, and Zerah of Tamar. Pharez begat Ezram begat Aram begat Aminadab begat Nason begat Salmon begat Boaz of Rahab. Boaz begat Obed of Ruth. Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David the king. Matthew 1, 3 through 6. Now if you take those fathers to their children and you count the order, when you start at Pharez, which is Genesis 38, Pharez is the child born of fornication. That is an illegitimate child. That is what the text calls in Deuteronomy 23 a bastard, an illegitimate child. If you count from Pharez to David, you have 10 generations. Deuteronomy 23, how long does this issue of an illegitimate child last? It says, even to his 10th generation. So when you look at Deuteronomy 23:2, and you count up the generations from Perez to David, David is that 10th person. Now, when you look at this, what does that now mean? Let's go back to Psalm 51:5. Let's make a point. Let's read the verses previous to it. Again, I don't believe Psalm 51 has nothing to do with born in sin. I do not believe in total depravity, whether you're getting it from Augustine or whether you're getting it from John Calvin. Those are your sources where you're going to get total inherited depravity. Augustine the Catholic, John Calvin, but you are not going to get it from the Bible. Now, let's read this before we get to verse number 5. Look what David says. This is verse 1. Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according to the multitude of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. See, this is my thing. With total depravity, born in sin, whose transgressions are you guilty of? Well, with the Calvinistic idea, the Catholic idea of born in sin, really you're starting out with Adam's transgression. But David is saying, be merciful to my transgression. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, not Adam's iniquity. Cleanse me from my sin, not Adam's sin. For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Against thee, thee only have I sinned, and done this evil in thy sight, that thou mightest be justified when thou speakest, and behold, and be clear when thou judgest. So previously to this text, it's all about his issues, his sinful activity. But when you get to verse number 5, here's my question. Why did the first 4 verses spend so much time talking about David's iniquity, just so that you can get to verse number 5 and say, well, it's all about Adam's iniquity? Look at what he says. Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Now, here's what people are going to say. You're going to say, even though you have been introduced to Deuteronomy 23:2, an illegitimate child shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord even to his 10th generation. And David is noting himself as being in that line of Genesis 38, Ruth 4:12. Some of y'all are going to say, Tamar was not David's mother. So how can he say, behold, and sin? The same way that the Bible says, the book of generation of Jesus the Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Does anybody think when they're reading their New Testament text that David's immediate physical father, or Jesus' immediate physical father, was David? And then someone says, it wasn't David. Abraham, as we think of the terms mom and dad, father, they're going to say Abraham was his father. No. What's it talking about? Descendants. So when you look at Psalm 51:5, and David is noting, he says, behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and sin did my mother conceive me. He is noting himself as being a part of the 10 generations of Deuteronomy 23:2. Now, another idea that I do believe it does not contradict, I believe that it basically is the same. It's David looking at and saying, if you want to say it this way, I haven't fallen far from the tree. What was David's sin, most popular sin that everybody knows about? Fornication with Bathsheba. Now, let's talk about this too. Psalm 51:5. Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and sin did my mother conceive me. You know, based on other texts of the Bible, sin cannot be transferred to that other person. Ezekiel 18:20 says, the soul that sins, it shall die. Deuteronomy says you cannot punish the child for the sins of the father. And I've said this before. You go into a court hearing and somebody's dad commits the crime, you're not going to start looking at the child who is like totally separated from the whole crime and say, well, because he did this, we're actually punishing you too. We recognize we wouldn't do that. So what's he saying? He's recognizing himself as a part of the 10 generations, Deuteronomy 23:2. He is recognizing that his sin is just like Judah and Tamar, fornication. All of this fits together, y'all. You have Ruth 4:12 bring up Perez. Why would they bring up Perez? Because they are in that line. They are in the 10 generations of Deuteronomy 23:2. When you get to David, and he says in Psalm 51:5, he says, I was conceived, behold, in sin did my mother conceive me. Now, conception. Can the act of conceiving the child be sinful? Yes. You can conceive a child in sinful activity, which would be fornication, or possibly, someone says adultery. Well, that's still fornication. It just involves a married person. Can a child be, like they say, born in sin? The Bible says no. Multiple passages. Let's look at this. Ecclesiastes 7:29. I don't want to get too far into like all these passages, but I'm just saying, lo, this only have I found, that God has made man upright, but they sought out many inventions. Well, with the born in sin idea, we don't be born upright and then seek out wicked inventions. We are just born depraved, wanting all wicked inventions. That's just one. Let's show you another one. Zechariah 12:1. The burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, says the Lord, which stretches forth the heavens and laid the foundation of the earth, and he forms the spirit of man within him. Now my question is, James 1 says God can't tempt us. He cannot tempt us with sin. Well, can he actually form our spirit to be totally depraved and then command us, try to avoid sin, knowing full well that he made us to always want sin? That whole idea of born in sin will not work. It's not in the text. Now, I have one more thing to show you about this. For the folk who are saying, well, Caleb, I don't know about that. I'm about to show you somebody you don't know either. A lot of people have no clue who John Gill is. I don't know when John Gill was alive. I know he's dead, and I know he lived a long time ago. But John Gill is he's a very famous Calvinist. A lot of Calvinists do not like him. Well, that's against the fact that dude is well known. You may not know him, but he is very famous. And for the people who are saying, Caleb, I don't know about that. Well, if you read John Gill's exposition of the entire Bible, you will have one of the most well-known Calvinists at least crediting this idea. He says, besides, had this been the case, as David would have been a bastard, he would not have been suffered to enter into the congregation of the Lord according to the law in Deuteronomy 23:2, whereas he often did with great delight, Psalm 42:4. Now, even he is making a note to say, this is in the text. He recognizes this is an idea. So all the people would say, well, I don't know about that. Even John Gill has to recognize Deuteronomy 23:2 is in the Bible. Ruth 4:12, where you're going to get the line of David who writes Psalm 51:5, is going to make reference to Genesis 38. Now, I get it. Somebody would say, they would just say, you know, I can't piece all that together. I just can't make that work. Well, on the flip side of what you're doing, if you're one of the people who says, I just can't make that work, what you are actually doing is using Psalm 51:5 to contradict a whole handful of other passages. So you're not willing. Do you remember when my dad debated A.C. Smith? And A.C. Smith said, well, Johnny's plan of salvation requires you piecing together other passages. Like he said, Mark 16:16, which has belief in baptism together. And he says, you have to piece Mark 16:16 to Luke 13:3 to Acts 2:38. And A.C. Smith said, well, I don't like that. Well, remember, A.C. Smith's idea wasn't in the Bible at all. Salvation by faith only. So he doesn't like piecing scriptures together. But his doesn't even exist to be pieced together. So people who are going to look at Deuteronomy 23:2 and you're going to say, I don't know about that. Caleb, I don't know if I can take Genesis 38 to Deuteronomy 23:2 to Ruth 4:12 to Psalm 51:5. That's only 4 steps. It's not that difficult. Genesis 38, Deuteronomy 23:2, Ruth 4:12, and then Psalm 51:5. Whereas if you don't buy that, your only other option is to take Psalm 51:5 and make it contradict Genesis 6, where it says that they had corrupted themselves. You have to contradict Genesis 6. You have to contradict Ecclesiastes 7:29. You have to contradict, let me pull up one more. I said I didn't want to go too deep, but here we go. I'm good. In Ezekiel 28:15. You're going to have to contradict Ezekiel 28:15. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou was created. You're going to have to contradict that with Psalm 51:5. If you don't take a 4-step process, Genesis 38, Deuteronomy 23:2, Ruth 4:12, Psalm 51:5, you're going to have to contradict all of these passages. And that's not even including Matthew 19:14. Jesus said, suffer little children and forbid them not to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 18:3. Verily I say unto you, except you be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Why is Jesus saying become like these little children if children are as equally depraved as adults? Here's my point. John Gill may not agree with it, but John Gill at least credits it or gives credence to it, that it is an argumentation. So it's not like I just pulled something wild out of my hat. And it's not even, someone says, well, Caleb, you're quoting John Gill and he doesn't even agree with you. John Gill's not going to agree with 90% of what I'm going to be teaching from the Bible. And why? I believe John Gill was a Baptist and he was a hyper-Calvinist, which I basically say is the logical conclusion of all Calvinism. But he at least gives credence to the argumentation that it exists. Now let's take a second. What did we do? I showed you why we're even talking about Ruth, and I need to basically move along. Why talk about Ruth? Well, it belongs in the first 3 chapters of the book of Judges, and that's where we are. And it's valuable. Someone said, well, I don't even know that we needed to talk about Ruth. Well, Ruth is helpful to the born in sin discussion, and you want to help people get away from that, so in that point it's valuable. But now let's look at this, y'all. We're going to quickly hit some tidbits, and then we have to start moving. We really have to start moving. This is the scene for Ruth. You're going to be talking with people, and they're going to find these things that are supposed contradictions, and these are important supposed contradictions because Ruth very much involves Jesus the Christ. It came to pass, this is Ruth 1, it came to pass that in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of that man was Elimelech, the name of his wife was Naomi. And it says the name of his 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab, and the name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. And Mahlon and Chilion died, also both of them, and the woman was left of her 2 sons and her husband. Now, someone says, is this a contradiction? How? It said, of Bethlehem, Judah, and then called them Ephrathites. And so someone's going to say, well, are they from Judah or are they from Ephraim? And why that matters, and this is a big moment, is because Jesus has to be from the tribe of Judah. And we already looked at Matthew chapter 1. Ruth and Boaz play a part in this line. Now, let's look at this. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. Well, when you look at 1 Samuel 1:1, look at how it says this. There was a certain man of Mount Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, and it says the son, an Ephrathite. Now here, as it says Mount Ephraim, Ephrathite, and you will find, we've had this discussion back in Joshua, remember, is it an Ephraimite or an Ephrathite? And we said, well, you can find it both ways. But someone's going to say, we got to figure this out because he has to be from Judah. And here's your answer. Genesis 35:16 through 19. Let's move this around because it keeps getting in the way of my verses. And they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath, and Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. You go down to verse number 19. Rachel died and was buried in the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. All this is a city that had one name, a name at one particular time. It might have 2 names. It might be interchangeable. It might have changed, but here we have in the text that explains it for us. Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. So when it says Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah, they are from Judah. That's all this is saying. So there's no contradiction there. It's actually easy to figure this out. I always talk about a concordance. A concordance is like a Bible dictionary where you find a word and it shows you every time in the Bible that word is used. And you could look in your concordance for Ephrath, and you could have easily figured out in Genesis 35, 16, and 19, this is talking about Bethlehem, Judah. They're Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. Now, here's the second point that we're going to have to talk about in the book of Ruth. Is it lawful or unlawful for Boaz to marry a Moabite? Now, I said in a Bible class one time where the preacher just flat out said it was wrong. Here's my thing. There's a lot of documentation of what happens that's wrong, but I just don't think this is wrong. In Deuteronomy 7, 1 through 3, the Israelites do not have a command that they just cannot marry a non-Israelite. Not at all. In Deuteronomy 7, 1 through 3, they just can't marry Canaanites, which is 7 particular nations. Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, 7 nations, neither shalt thou make marriages with them. But that does not mean everybody at their time of the known world. When you read Deuteronomy 2:9, the Lord said unto me, this is Moses talking to the second generation, the Lord said unto me, distress not the Moabites, neither contend with them in battle, for I will not give thee of their land for possession, because I have given unto the children of Lot for a possession. Now, do you see that? You're going to find where she's a Moabite. She's going to call herself a stranger. These are Gentiles, non-Israelites. But look how closely related they are. They're not Canaanites. They're not in that 7 nationality discussion of Deuteronomy 7. But they are very closely connected to Abraham. Lot is Abraham's nephew. And in Deuteronomy 2:9, God says, don't distress them. Don't go out of your way to make war with them. Now, a lot of times you're going to find Moabites making war with the Israelites and they defend themselves. But God had said on the front end, don't be messing with these people. This is the only thing they have commanded to them. Don't go to war with these people. But the non-marriage issue is for the 7 nations of the Canaanites. And he said, just don't be causing unnecessary war with these people. Now, even as we move on, that, to me, answers that. But even in the discussion, if you recognize the Moabites are not necessarily Canaanites, Boaz's mother is a Canaanite. Does she come into the people of Israel in Joshua 6? Yes, she does. But she's not by birth of Jewish descent. And that's Matthew 1:5. You're going to see that. Matthew 1:5 says that Salmon with Rahab begat Boaz. Joshua 6, she is a woman of Jericho. It's not a problem for him to marry, for Boaz to marry Ruth being a Moabite. You can't textually use that. Deuteronomy 2:9 says just don't make war with them. Deuteronomy 7 only lists 7 nations. Now, the reason I said that a moment ago was I said I heard a man in the Bible class just full on say it was wrong, can't do it, shouldn't do it. Made a big old point out of it in 1 Corinthians 8 verse number 2. That's all I'm saying. People who think they know, we often don't know as we ought to. And that's what he said in 1 Corinthians 8:2, and that's why we're doing this particular class. Then someone's going to say, well, why did she flee to a non-Jewish place? That doesn't make sense. You're having a famine, and these folk flee to a non-Jewish area, Moab. Now, when you get to Samuel, when you get to the life of David, and he goes and he flees among and hides among the Canaanites. And somebody would say, that's pretty bad, David. You're looking at David and you say, that's pretty bad. Even if you're on the run from Saul, that's one thing, but you don't go aligning yourself with like the Philistines and what have you. Well, I know that the text says they go to Moab and she is a Moabite, but let's not act like there are no Jews at all over there. I mean, they could have easily known people over there. Moses gave unto the tribe of the children of Reuben inheritance according to their families, and their coast was from this word unto the bank of the river Arnon. And you can see Arnon right there in the map, the river Arnon. So they are going to where there will be Moabites, but they're also going to a place where there will be people from Reuben. It's not just totally uncharted and saying, why in the world are you going to these non-Jews? They could have known people over there. They are, in fact, Moabites, Ruth and her fellow sister-in-law. But now let's look at this, y'all. In instances where you would say, I don't understand why it's not all bad, and that's what I keep saying about these Old Testament texts. I say give these people some breathing room, because I think a lot of people are going to look back at us years from now, and they're going to see things about us, and they're going to be saying, why were they doing that? And this is what I say. They're going to find things about us that won't be the entirety of our existence, right? That one attribute does not necessarily define us. And so even looking at this point, if you may have pause about this and say you don't know about that, it's not the entirety of their existence, but you do get something good out of it. Ruth 1:6, they are over in Moab, and she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab how that the Lord had visited His people in giving them bread. I would say that this is a moment where you get to have Gentile evangelism, and I have that written down in my text. I have it written down in a lot of places where I can find it. Gentile evangelism is very important. Why is it important? When you find these points of Gentile evangelism in your Old Testament text, that is the explanation of Romans chapter 2, verses number 12 through 15. Romans 2, 12 through 15 is not talking about an innate moral compass. Romans 2, 12 through 15 is talking about how Gentiles associated with people, Romans 3:1, who had the oracles of God. And when they associated with them, they learned their practices, and that's what Romans 2, 12 through 15 is talking about. So it's not all bad that they went over to Moab, which in your tribal map is a possession of Reuben. It's not just a totally foreign place. There is good that comes out of it. Gentile evangelism does come out of it. Now, someone might, this is another one, someone might say, I want to make a point here, I want to pause with you. We're going to cover Ruth today. It's only 4 chapters, and all of it is a very, very compact discussion of them getting married. I'm sorry for people who don't, they're saying, well, Caleb, you're not giving it the credit that it deserves for being a love story. I'm going to make some points. I just don't see it that way the way you do. That's fine if you want to read it that way, but there's, I think, a bigger element going on. Why did she not invite them back to Israel? What I meant to say was there's a lot of stuff in the text that you and I are going to brush over to get the big picture. Why did she not invite them to Israel? She says, go return each to her mother's house, and the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. So Naomi just says, go back. Of chapter 1, she says, Naomi says, behold, your sister-in-law has gone back unto her people and to her gods, little g gods, idols. So you might be looking at this text and say, why did Naomi tell her daughter-in-laws just go back to your people knowing that they were idol worshipers? And y'all, when we read our Bible, we can be so short-sighted to say such a thing like that. Why did she not invite them to come back to Israel and get away from these idols? There were idols in Israel. Judges 3:7, the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and forgot the Lord their God and served Balaam and the groves. You know, it's like someone might say, well, they would have a better chance in Israel. I understand that. But also they would be just fine in Moab because the Reubenites are there. So I do want to make a point here, and I don't want to be like taken the wrong way. There's only one church in the Bible, and it is the Church of Christ. And inside of your New Testament, you will find a set prescription on the elements of worship. You will find it authorized in your New Testament what God wants out of our worship. You will find in your New Testament that there is only one plan of salvation. Jude 3 says the common faith. Let's go ahead and look at Jude 3. Common salvation. The contend for the faith, which was, well, here it is, gave all diligence unto you of the common salvation. It was needful to write unto you that you might earnestly contend for the faith which was delivered unto the saints. Now here's what you have. In this text you have common salvation, the faith, singular, which was delivered unto the saints, singular entity. Now here's my point. Do I believe in one church? Yes, I do. Do I believe in one New Testament authorized idea of worship? Yes, I do. Do I believe in one plan of salvation taught in the New Testament? Yes, I do, but here's my point. There are some congregations out there that have Church of Christ on their sign, and I would just as well send people over to any man-made sect as to send them to that church building. They don't teach anything. They're living And someone says, well, none of us are perfect. There's a far cry from being perfect to the way that some of these folk live. They don't even try to uphold New Testament Christianity or any of the doctrine. So I get this. Naomi looks at it's possible Naomi looked at the situation of Israel and said, we got people in Israel, Judges 3:7, that are worshiping idols. Y'all go back to Moab, they're going to be worshiping idols. It's 6 one way, half a dozen the other. And that is how I feel about sending people who call me and they say, I watch What Does the Bible Say on YouTube, and I live in such and such town in such and such state, and they start telling me about the congregations where they are, and I just tell them, I wouldn't go there. And they say, but, you know, and they're saying, I'm confused, they have Church of Christ on the sign. Okay, read the first 3 chapters of the book of Revelation, and you will find people who were the church of the first century, and they were being told, you're not faithful. That's it. You got to see this stuff in the text. Instead of hitting and beating up on Naomi for saying just go back home, you have to realize this is the state we're living in. There's a lot of congregations I wouldn't send people to. Now, I do want to say this. We've got to make a hard transition. Ruth should make us stop complaining, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this because you're going to get a second lesson on Ruth. She says, call me not Naomi, Ruth 1:19 through 21. Call me not Naomi, but call me Mara, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. So you're going to get a lesson on this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But when you look at Ruth, the book, you're going to start seeing some elements that would say, I don't know why you are being this hard on God for your circumstances. So when you look at Ruth 1:12, what she says to her daughter-in-laws, her husband has died and her children have died. Her sons have died. She says, turn again, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. So she counts herself as an old person, and her husband has died. Old people die. Young people die. So when you're old and your spouse dies, I get that it's hard for people, and for people who have had a long, healthy marriage, I get it when they just die because their spouse died. You don't know how to live without them. I hear you. But don't be blaming God and say God's being very, very bitter with me. Old people just die. Here's a point. I have to hit this. How is it that she's old? And in Ruth 4:16, it's going to say Naomi nursed a baby. I don't know too many of these grandmothers out here nursing the baby. All that means is she participated in rearing them. She participated in the guided instruction of the child. Look at Numbers 11:12. It says nursing fathers. Do y'all know any daddies that can nurse the way y'all think can nurse? No, that's just a tidbit for your notes. She says, God has dealt bitterly with me. Well, if y'all are really old and he died, it's kind of expected. And then in Ruth 4:3, Naomi, that has come again out of the country of Moab, sells a parcel of land which was our brother Elimelech's. She's not totally empty, like you came home with a land plot. You're going through the process of your kinsman. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Look at this. Ruth 4:15. Look at how the people, they viewed the relationship between Ruth and Naomi. And they said, your daughter-in-law, which loves thee, is better to thee than 7 sons. Is it the same relationship? No, it's not the same relationship. But you can have different relationships that are actually more profound than the closer, the blood. And that's why I say, y'all talk about blood thicker than water. It's not. It's really not. Principles are what matter. And Ruth is the one who said, where you go, I'll go, your people will be my people, your God will be my God. She is intact with the ideas. And that's going to be stronger and thicker than blood. So here's my point to this. People would say, it could be worse. It could be worse. And I'll just tell you, like I have my stomach problem. And I'd say this to people, I have ulcerative colitis, and I hate it. And people say to me, they say, I hate to hear that for you. And my response is, it could be Crohn's. And Crohn's is worse. I'm glad that I do not have Crohn's, right? You work on your perspective, things could always be worse. And we get that from Ruth. Now, this is what I want to do. We've got an hour left, and I want to cover this. Hit our commercial like we do. Check out go to Google, type in YouTube Johnny Robertson. This is what it will look like. You tell your friends wherever they are that they can check this out. Now, here's my thing about this. You are a Christian, but your family members are lost, and you have tried to talk with them, and you say, I'm just not making headway. Here's my thing about recommending What Does the Bible Say on YouTube to your family members. Let us try to help you teach them the truth. That's my thing. Now, here's another point about it. It's not just for lost people, even though that is our focus. You have fellow brothers and sisters in Christ who you know are in areas and the preaching's not good, the congregation is dead. You could, I'm saying, at least tell them that this is available to them, where we try to help edify them and we try to motivate them to do evangelism where they are in their area. And then do this. Email me at calebgrobertson@gmail.com, and I will put you on our weekly informer list. So every Sunday morning you can get a 1.5-page Bible article. We spend more time on actual text Bible discussion than we do busy work, which is usually what bulletins are. Bulletins are usually just a whole bunch of busy work. This is a whole separate Bible discussion for your growth, for your edification. Email me at calebgrobertson@gmail.com. We'll put you on the Sunday morning informer list. Tell people about What Does the Bible Say on YouTube. Come out and visit with us in person. 823 Starling Avenue in Martinsville is where the Church of Christ assembles on Sundays. 120 American Legion Boulevard in Danville is where the brethren assemble on Sundays. You can come visit with us. If you want to wear a mask, that's fine. The auditoriums, the rooms are big enough to where if you don't want to sit next to anybody, you don't have to. But we have never shut down, no plans to shut down. We want you to come out and be a part of the Bible study. That's what this is about. When you come out and you're a visitor, we're not going to be hounding you to make an offering, anything like that. We just want you to pay attention to the teaching. Bring your Bible. That's it. Okay. How Bible study works, y'all. This is what I really wanted to do with this. You won't understand, like I said, Ruth is only 4 chapters long, and it is all a discussion about these two people getting married. You don't have a clue what is going on if you don't know Deuteronomy 25, verse number 5. In Deuteronomy 25, verse number 5 through 10, this is what you have. Why do they go into so much discussion about, you go over to Boaz, and he's our near of kin. And then you have that whole scene where Ruth, in chapter 9, Ruth asks Boaz to marry her. Take me to be your wife. And Boaz says, I'd love to. And he says, thank you for even thinking of me that way. But then he says, there's a problem. He said, there's somebody who is of closer kinship to you than I am. And somebody's reading the book of Ruth, and y'all are saying, this is some weird stuff, and I don't know what's going on. It's not that it's weird. You just don't know Deuteronomy 25. If brethren dwell together, and one of them die, and has no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in unto her, and take her to him to wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother unto her. And it shall be that the firstborn which she beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel. And if the man, can I just stop and say, y'all know, I know that y'all know this is not weird. So do you remember during the draft, what was one way that a male could actually be exempt from military service? If he was going to be the last male in that family, if he could not carry, you might be saying I'm wrong. It's possible I could be wrong. You could inform me if I am, but I don't think that I am. I believe this is how it worked. You could be excused from that if you were the last name-bearing son. Now, we have a concept of we don't want the name to go out. We have a concept of it. You don't want your name to go out. And this is not just about the name. It is about the entirety of the people. Why? Because these people have to be maintained until the Messiah comes. It shall be the firstborn which she bears shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead. And if the man like not to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate unto the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up unto his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak unto him, and if he stand it and say, I like not to take her, then shall his brother's wife come unto him in the presence of the elders, loose his shoe from off his foot, spit in his face, and shall answer and say, so shall it be done unto that man that will not build up his brother's house, and his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him that hath his shoe loosed. Now, You don't like that part either. Well, I think that we do things, culturally speaking, that other people are going to look at and they're going to say, why do y'all do that? So let's not get hung up on that. But do you see the process of this? When an Israelite man died and he had not produced any children, it was his near kin's responsibility, who has the same name, right? The same lineage. Same lineage is supposed to take his wife and bear children so that the name is not put out of the land. Now, here's my point about Deuteronomy 25 and the book of Ruth. Yo, we've got to do better on our Bible study. Now, here's my thing. When I say we've got to do better on our Bible study, some of y'all are overwhelmed and you're looking at Bible study the wrong way. I don't expect you to learn this stuff overnight, but you do for some reason. You think, Caleb, I'm however old. I can't learn this stuff. And you make up all these excuses as to why not. Stop looking at your Bible study like it's a sprint. This is a marathon. Your whole Christian life is a marathon. You have time, and people would say, and the people who say, I don't have time, man, you got all kinds of time. There's time all over the place that we just waste. So I'm done with that. I don't have time. You got time. This is how all of your Bible study will work. You will not have a clue what's going on in Ruth if you don't know Deuteronomy 25. You won't understand any of your New Testament epistles without the book of Acts, and people do not read Acts. You won't understand the book of Hebrews without reading the Pentateuch, first 5 books, the Law of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. You won't understand what's going on in Hebrews if you don't have a working knowledge of what they were doing back then. You won't understand John's revelation without the prophets. Y'all don't ever read. I'm saying Isaiah is a big book. You don't read Isaiah, you don't read Amos, you don't read Hosea, and then you all want to jump into Revelation. And y'all, I talked about this last time. These folk who all they want to do is talk about end times, and they're not even saved. And you let them wind you up and get you in an end times argument, and you're saved, and you're not telling them how they're lost. You won't understand the revelation without the prophets. And that's why when I told you about having that Bible study with that Baptist man, and he was talking about all these different elements inside the revelation, I said, I said, do you know about Isaiah 34, 4 through 6? Idumea, which is Edom. And he said, well, Edom's going to have to be raised up and destroyed all over again. That's wild. This is why in the text, Ruth 1, 11, 13, you're going to read your text and you're going to say, what? Naomi said, turn again, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb? What are you talking about? That they may be your husbands? Why do we have to marry your other children? Turn again, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband also tonight and should bear sons, would you wait till they were grown? This is Deuteronomy 25, and you just didn't know that. Now, you might be listening today and say, well, Caleb, I did know that, and you're wasting my time. Honestly, this is a sincere statement. Good for you that you knew Deuteronomy 25:5, but I'm talking to a whole audience of people that did not know that. It's fantastic that you did, but we got to work with these other people who did not know that. Now look at this. Ruth 2:1, Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a mighty man of wealth of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. And all this has to do with Deuteronomy 25, verse number 5. And now it is true, he says, it's true, I am thy near kinsman, howbeit there is a kinsman nearer than I. Tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning that if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman's part. But if he will not do the part of a kinsman to thee, then I will do the part of a kinsman to thee, as the Lord liveth. Lie down until the morning. Ruth 3, 12 through 13. So are you seeing how this works? You can read Ruth on your own. It's only 4 chapters, and you can understand what's going on in the general sense. But I don't want people reading Ruth and saying, I don't get like this theme of kinsmen all through the book. And I could fix that so easily in this conversation with you. Deuteronomy 25. Now, for the people who are all about it being a love story, I don't want to like just rob you of that, but I am saying there's a lot going on that you're just not paying attention to. It's not like Boaz went out in the field one day and just said, man, who is that? Ruth, and I'm saying this, some people are going to be out there saying, well, there's more to a relationship than looks. But everybody likes to know, like hear their spouse say, you are good looking. They like that. We like compliments. I just don't think that's necessarily what's going on here. Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, Let me now go to the field and glean ears of corn after him, in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said unto her, Go, my daughter. Then said Boaz unto his servant that was set over the reapers, Whose damsel is this? I don't think it's a thing of we're all just walking the field together and he just, man, I saw Ruth and I could not take my eyes off Ruth. I don't think that's what's going on. I think that it's Exodus 21, verse number 7. That these texts are underlying to the discussion and we just don't know them, which is 1 Corinthians 8, number 2. If any man thinks that he knows, he often doesn't know as he ought to know. In Exodus 21:7, they had a stipulation, they had a law. If a man sell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. Yeah, they had separated workers. Women and men weren't just going out doing the same work. And why not? Y'all, come on now. Somebody said, well, we talking about equality. My wife had me carry in a bag of soil because she flat out said, Caleb, I can't lift that. So what you going to put them out here? Can't do. That would be like abusive, saying, well, we know you're going to have a hard time, but you wanted equality, so go ahead and pick that big old bag up. It's sensible. You understand it. You get it. Exodus 21:7. She was actually out working with the men, and that's why he said, whose damsel is this? The men are working. Ruth is on the scene. Exodus 21, verse number 7 exists. Hey, she might have been beautiful. I think that they really loved each other. But I don't think that that's what this is, and I'm making it a point out for better Bible study. Know your text better. 1 Corinthians 8:2. Let's try to do better. You might be saying, well, Caleb, who doesn't want to be better? Who are you talking to? There are people in the church, and they will admit to you, they have been members of the church for however many years, and they will say, I don't study anymore. And do you know what that means? That translates out to, y'all ever put anything into like Google Translate? When a person tells you that they have been in the church for so long, I don't study anymore, put that into Google Translate, and that comes out meaning don't listen to them anymore. We can always do better. And that's what I'm trying to make an example out of here. You're reading Ruth and you don't know Deuteronomy 25? What did we do earlier? You're reading Ruth and you didn't know that it belonged in the first 3 chapters of Judges. You're reading Ruth 4:12 and you don't know that that's connected to Genesis 38, which is connected to Deuteronomy 23, which is connected to Psalm 51:5. That's what I want to do with this text. I think you can read Ruth and you can get it. But there are these underlying themes that are easy to look over because we don't know the rest of our Bible. I think Exodus 21:7 is behind it. Then said Boaz unto Ruth, Hearest thou not, my daughter? Go, he tells her, go not to glean in another field, neither go from hence. But look what he says to do. Abide here by my maidens. So Exodus 21:7 says you don't send a woman out to do the men's work. And Boaz's idea is he wants to now put her with the other ladies. Let thine eyes be on the field that they do reap, and go thou after them. And then he says this. He's telling her, stay with the ladies. But then he says this down here, have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch thee? And when thou art athirst, go into the vessels and drink of that which the young men have drawn. And when he was, this is verse 15, when he was risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, Let her glean even among the sheaves, and reproach her not. What does that mean? Do not shame her. What does that mean? What he already told them. Don't touch her. He's having to tell these men multiple times, don't touch this woman, which is exactly why we're going to make an excursion here. We're going to go back to Deuteronomy 22. This is exactly why in Exodus 21:7 he says, don't be putting the female workers with the men workers. Let me turn over here. Look at Deuteronomy 22:25. Man, you're looking at your text and you're saying, well, these are Jews. And Boaz is having to tell them over and over, don't touch this woman. But if a man find a betrothed damsel in the field, and the man force her and lie with her, then the man only that lie with her shall die. Ian and I were talking in a room with 3 atheists. And they asked this question. They said, why does God just get to decide what's right and wrong? And I asked these guys, I said, are y'all like pro-rape in any scenario? And they all said, no. I said, okay, we are all opposed to rape. I said, what do you think of Exodus 21:7? If a man sell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. And they very quickly got it. I said, do you think this is like some random thing that God should not be able to say? And then one of those atheist fellows said, are you trying to imply that some type of sexual foul play would happen here? And I said, that is exactly right. Look at Deuteronomy 22:25 again. It's not random. These are well thought out principles. There's all kinds of discussion to be had about when women entered into the workplace and all of the hurdles it created. I can imagine that instances of sexual harassment on the job before women entered into the workplace was very, very low. Right? These are not random. These are well thought out things. Now, I do want to make this point here. You might be saying, these are Jews, Romans 3:1, people that have the oracles of God, and yet Boaz is having to say multiple times to these people, don't touch her. Someone might be saying, it goes without saying that we're out here doing work. I shouldn't have to be thinking about, like, am I going to be groped out here doing the work? Here's my thing. This is where I say, people being people. You say, people being people, Caleb, that's unacceptable. I know that a lot of things are unacceptable, and I'm still saying they're unacceptable. The idea of you go out in the field to work and somebody starts groping you, it's unacceptable. It is going to happen at some point. And so instead of like having these discussions about, well, you know, someone says, well, it's just unacceptable. And I'm over here saying, well, it's bound to happen, so why don't we have an ounce of prevention? Exodus 21:7, and you keep them separated. That's what's going on here. And that same idea applies to Christians. You say these are people that are Jews and they know better, but yet they're still having to be told multiple times, don't touch this woman. Christians will be real Christians and they will still be enticed. James 1:13-14. They will be enticed and they will give in to their temptation and they will do something that's wrong. The question is, will they correct it after they have done it? People being people, will you correct it after you've done it? Will we try to actually not do those things again? Now, quick tidbit, and we're going to really be moving on. I think that we're doing well on our time. I do need to send a text really quickly. Okay, quick tidbit. You can do this with your texts, with your scriptures, but it's not like I always say this. You know, you find something and you say, did God in heaven intend for that? What we're about to talk about, I don't think that God in heaven intended it to become a bone of contention. I think it's right there in the text. You can use Ruth chapter 3 for your notes on 1 Corinthians 11:6 and the head covering. So, like I said, don't want to spend too much time, but I do think this. God in heaven, I don't think that He meant for this part of the text to become a bone of contention. You can use it. You can have the discussion this way, even though I said God in heaven, does He think, you know, was He thinking that in Ruth chapter 3 we'd get a note out of this? I have to say that I don't think it should be such a bone of contention like it is with some people. The head covering in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Verse number 16 says, if any man seem to be contentious, we have no such custom, neither the church of God. So he says right here, we have no such custom. And what is it? What are the options for? He says, we have no such custom. Option number one is, we have no such custom, he says, in the churches of God for what? The head covering. Which means what? It is simply a custom given to a particular geographic location. Corinth, right? So option number one is, he says, we have no such custom of the head covering in the churches of God. Or then option number two, he says, if any man seem to be contentious, we have no such custom to argue about it. Either way, you're not going to be able to bind this on us. We have no such custom, option number one, the head covering itself, which I do not think is even talking about fabric. We have no such custom, number two, to be binding it, to be arguing about it with other people. Now, here's my statement to this on how you can, quick tidbit, and then we're going to move on. How you can use Ruth chapter 3, verse number 15. I'm not trying to be ugly to anybody. I don't want you to think that I'm being disrespectful, but I am going to be realistic in this conversation. I see people, and they have this thing, these ladies, and they have this thing on the back of their head, like a doily or something, and they call that a head covering. And then I see some other ladies, and they don't do the little doily on the back of their head. They just put like a bandana over their quarter of their skull, and they call that a head covering. That is not covering anything. If y'all really believe in 1 Corinthians 11 and that women ought to have their head covering, y'all are not covering anything. The little lace doilies doesn't cover anything. The little bandanas doesn't cover anything. So here's a note, and let's talk about this. I'm all for the discussion, and I'm fine. Like I said, somebody's going to catch me on something. I say, good thinking. I'm glad you're paying attention. He says to Ruth, bring the veil that thou hast upon thee and hold it. And when she held it, he measured 6 measures of barley and laid it on her, and she went into the city. So here's a discussion point. Y'all got this little lace doily on the back of your head, or you got a bandana going over 1/4 of your head, and you call that a covering. Well, when this text says veil, this woman is actually able to be carrying around measures of barley in it. You couldn't fit anything in your little lace doily. You couldn't fit anything in your little bandana. We're in a conversation. This is where somebody's going to say, wait a minute. And I'm fine. I'm fine with this. They're going to say the word veil in Ruth 3:15 is actually going to be a different word than the word veil that we're going to see, a different Hebrew word that we're going to see in Genesis 38. I'm okay with that. Because when we go to Genesis 38, 14, and 15, which is Judah and Tamar all over again, when she put her widow's garment off from her and covered her with a veil, different word, she wrapped herself and set it in an open place, which is, by the way, a Timnath, for she saw that Shelah was grown and was not given unto him to wife. And when Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot because she had covered her face with what? A veil. Covered. Right? In Ruth 3. Someone's going to argue with me, and I'm fine. I'll give that one to you. I'm saying she was able to carry measures of barley in it. Y'all couldn't fit anything in your lace doily. You wouldn't fit anything in your bandana. And when this woman, Genesis 38, when Tamar put a veil on, her whole face was covered. I don't think that y'all are being realistic with your own ideas of 1 Corinthians 11. You're not even covering anything. You put the tiniest little bit of fabric on the top of your head that you could. I just don't think you're being consistent with it. I don't think you're being consistent with it while you make it a bone of contention with everybody. That's a quick tidbit, and we're going to move on. Y'all, this is very, very big for our discussion today. You and I have 2 ideas left to cover in this class, and we got 30 minutes to do it. Ruth educates us, 1 Corinthians 8:2. We think that we know something about marriage. Y'all, I don't want to puff myself up, right? Somebody's going to come along, they're going to think I'm wrong. But I'm saying I hear people in the Lord's church talk about marriage, and they make awful, awful arguments. And it's like, if this is something you got to watch for. Stop talking to people that only agree with you. There is value in talking to people who have an opposing thought. 2 ways. If they're right and you're wrong, it's beneficial that you get to change. Even if they're wrong, they might create an opportunity for you to view something in a way that you had not, and your argumentation gets even better. Our brethren are doing a horrible job on marriage and divorce. I don't want to be too hard, but it is what it is. Ruth shows us this question to think about. What is marriage, and how is a marriage created or performed? Why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because we, not necessarily on the marriage part, it's the divorce part that we are struggling with. What about, this is from the book, The New Reagan Revolution, and it's written by Ronald Reagan's son, who I believe his name is Michael Reagan. What about no-fault divorce law? Ronald Reagan signed it into law in 1969, and the rest of the nation quickly followed suit. By 1974, there were no-fault divorce statutes in 45 states. My father hoped, Ronald Reagan hoped that the no-fault statutes would reduce acrimony, legal costs, and harm to the children of divorce. Instead, divorce rates soared 250% nationwide from 1960 to 1980. Ronald Reagan later said that signing that bill, no-fault divorce, was one of the worst mistakes of his political career. Now, here's what we have to recognize. There's a lot of people who have married, they have divorced for non-biblical reasons, and they have now entered into new marriages. And some of our brethren can't figure out, do they get to stay in that new marriage, or do they actually need to dissolve it? Pre-1969, and y'all are all focused in on what the government says, pre-1969, the government wouldn't even have given them a divorce paper. When I come in contact with people and they tell me I'm divorced and they got a government piece of paper, I don't even care about that thing. The government gives divorce to everybody. It doesn't carry any weight in the discussion. I want to make a second point that is not really related. Y'all got to get off this stuff about the moral option of the vote. Ronald Reagan was considered the moral option, right? A lot of people look at Ronald Reagan and still, hey, I like some stuff that he did, but this moral option business, he gave us no-fault divorce. And I saw people earlier today talking about George Bush doing X, Y, Z, and they say, was he always like this? 2010, his wife Laura Bush put out a book, and she did all kind of interviews where she said the whole time they were pro-LGBT and they were pro-abortion. Yeah, these people, they're Episcopalians. They're not the moral option. What in the world? And you say, well, they're the lesser of two evils. They're still evil. You should stop banking on them to do something good when they are not Christians, and that's not even the job of a presidency. It's not your preacher in office. He's the commander-in-chief. Excursion. No-fault divorce. Look at this now. Our brethren look at the divorce paper and they say, they are divorced. No, they're not. Did God disjoin them? Look at this, y'all. This is my point. Our problem is that we only look at marriage through American lenses. People have a really hard time, like in Matthew 19, 1 through 9, where it talks about a writing of divorcement. And I know some people that get worked up about a writing of divorcement, and in our American government, you get a writing of divorcement. What did that look like in Matthew 19? Do you think that Jews married to other Jews actually had to farm out their divorce writings to the Romans? When you get to Acts 18, where, how you want to say his name, Gallio says to the Jews, if this is about y'all's law, take it away. I think that we as real New Testament Christians who have the truth of the New Testament have given way too much reach to the government as far as marriage and divorce. Let's look at this. You might be saying, well, how, Caleb, you're saying you don't even acknowledge the government's divorce papers? Not if it's not for Matthew 19:9, I don't. They might have a piece of paper. It holds no more value than the local newspaper. And here's my thing. They say, and you're saying, but the government said they're divorced. What would you be doing without the U.S. government? Can we get married without a government system? He said, who art thou? And she answered and said, I am Ruth thy handmaid. And look what she says to him. Spread therefore thy skirt over thy handmaid, for thou art my near kinsman. You're going to see this language in Ezekiel 16:8. Now, this is talking about, it's God with the entire nation of Israel, but he views it as a marriage relationship. And he says, when I passed by thee and looked upon thee, behold, thy time was the time of love. And I spread my skirt over thee and covered thy nakedness. Yea, I swear unto thee and entered into a covenant with thee, says the Lord God, and thou became mine. What is marriage? It is a swear, it's an oath, and it's a covenant between a man and a woman who are eligible. And people act like it's the piece of paper. No, neither is the divorce a piece of paper. It has everything to do with God's stipulations. Now, I want you to think about this. People are so worked up about the government's piece of paper for a no-fault divorce. And we talked about this past Sunday in Bible class, not from Ruth, but from another perspective. You know, these were real things as far as our history in America. People got married and they said they jumped the broom. They tied the knot. They got hitched. And then I said to everybody, if you've seen the movie Braveheart, they go out in the woods. He puts his hand out. They fold a napkin over it. She puts her hand on the hand in the napkin. And I said, well, what does that mean to any of us? Nothing, but it meant something to them. If it's the case that marriages can be orchestrated, I'm saying created and viewed as binding in those situations without a government piece of paper, why are we letting the U.S. government just wreck marriage in America? There are a lot of people who got divorced. They had no right to get divorced. And because they had no right to get divorced and they entered into a subsequent marriage, they had no right to be in that marriage either. And you can find that in Matthew chapter 14. You can't tell somebody they don't have the right to be married. Herod laid hold on John and bound him and put him in prison for Herodias' sake, his brother Philip's wife. And John said, it's not lawful for thee to have her. John said it was not lawful for one man to call another man his wife. We're saying the same thing today. There are people who are governmentally married that God actually says it's not lawful. Do you see this? She comes in and uncovers his feet, and then she tells him, spread your skirt over me. This is their language. I think that this was customary ideas, just like we would say tying the knot, jumping the broom. This was customary language to them that was indicative of a marriage union. It's a covenant. Now let's look at this further. Somebody says when a man and a woman get married, they get a piece of paper and they're married when they get that piece of paper. No. No. When I passed by thee and looked upon thee, behold, the time, this is Ezekiel 16:8, I spread my skirt over thee, I swear unto thee and enter into a covenant with thee. Now let's look at this. Our culture today is not God's law. It is not above God's law. Neither does it dictate how we interact with God's law. And here's my thing. Ruth 4:7 flat out says, now, this was the manner in former times in Israel. And what does that mean? This was the manner in former times in Israel means it might not necessarily be that way later on in Israel. Concerning redeeming and concerning changing, for to confirm all things, a man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor, and this was testimony in Israel. So in Deuteronomy 25:5, what happened if the man said, he just tells a woman, I don't want to do it. She takes his shoe, spits in his face. What happens if one kinsman says, I don't want to do it, but this kinsman is willing? I don't think we have the whole spitting in the face scene. But the closer kinsman takes his shoe off and he gives it to the other kinsman. And now everybody acknowledges this was testimony in Israel. And y'all going to look at that and say, America, you got to have a written document. This was their written document. This was it. And this is my thing. You act like we can't follow the truth of Matthew 19:9 because American culture and government is getting in the way. If this can be the case, then I have to recognize that the government's piece of paper is not the authority. God's stipulations, God's actual legislation trumps whatever our government currently is doing. So here's a question that, people, they say, I just don't know, Caleb, that you can, I don't know that you can just be totally ignoring the government divorce paper just like you say that you are. If it's not abiding by Matthew 19:9, yeah, it's worthless. And here's what my dad says to these people. You go to, let's say, possibly the Philippines. I think that the Philippines would be predominantly Catholic. What would you do in a government system that actually is going to have heavy Catholic influence where they won't even allow you to get a divorce? And you're going to be talking to these people and saying, well, Matthew 19:9, and they're going to say, we're not giving you a divorce. Then at that point, you would have to say, we're going to do it despite what the government says. And that's the exact same thing that happened in the 1700s when people were colonizing in America in the beginning, and you couldn't get a marriage document unless you were Anglican. And I have heard a member of the church say, you don't have to be married. I am going to have my God-given right to marry a woman, and I'm not going to be Anglican to do it. They don't get to trump what the Bible says. And you wouldn't even have this problem if it weren't for Ronald Reagan in 1969. Now, I recognize somebody say, well, if Reagan didn't do it, somebody else would have done it. Well, even Ronald Reagan admitted it was a horrible mistake. Where's their paper? Therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, Buy it for thee. So he drew off his shoe, and Boaz said unto the elder and to all the people, You are witnesses this day, that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that the Chelon and Mahlon of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren. From the gate of his place ye are witnesses this day. And the people that were in the gate and the elders said, We are witnesses. That is their piece of paper. Do you get this? Give me a second. Why? I said this before in a previous class. You don't invite people to your wedding to have a good time. That's fine if you do. The original idea is that people are there to witness you taking vows to each other, and if you start trying to loose yourself, other than Matthew 19:9, you start trying to loose yourself from this marriage covenant, then all these witnesses are going to say, wait a minute, we were there, and we watched y'all make this oath to each other. You don't just get out of it. Where's their piece of paper? Now, here's the question, y'all. I'm trying to introduce folk to, I don't know, like, would you call this abstract thought? I know that it's thinking outside of the American purview. Is it possible to enter into a marriage without the government's piece of paper? Yes. Do we have to acknowledge every divorce that the government issues? No. And do you know how I know that you know that? I'm saying the government gives people a divorce paper that should not have gotten it because they didn't follow Matthew 19:9. And you say, well, Caleb, I think that if the government said they're divorced, they're divorced. What do you do with common law marriage? People shacking up for 7 years, the government just looks at them and says, they've been living together 7 years, they're married. And then you look at them and say, no, they're not. They're fornicating. See, it's like you can get it on the front end, you can't get it on the back end. And I'm saying Ruth introduces us to that way of thinking, and it's beneficial, y'all. And we need it. There's a lot of people, they may not like what I'm saying right now on the divorce aspect, but I know that you like it on the idea of nationalism when it trumps the Bible's teaching. I'm American. I'm a Christian first. So when they started getting in the way of what the Bible really teaches on marriage and divorce, then I'm siding with the Bible. All that is in Ruth. What have we covered this morning? Ruth belongs in the first 3 chapters of the book of Judges. How do you know that? Ruth 1:1 says that this book happened when the judges ruled. When you look at Ruth chapter 3, Boaz is already an old man. When you look at Ruth 4, you're going to see 20 through 22, Boaz's mother and father were from the conquest, Rahab. She was already an adult. She gives birth. When you put all the time together, the first 3 chapters, Boaz is not going to outlive 140 years. They have to be somewhere in the first 3 chapters. What else did we do? We said if you start paying attention to the genealogical mentions in chapter 4, you put that together, it is a direct reference to Genesis 38, which is connected to Deuteronomy 23:2. When it talks about an illegitimate child and to the 10th generation, you put it with Ruth 4:12, you put that with Psalm 51:5. And we said this, even for the people who say, I don't know about that, even John Gill acknowledges that, okay? I know you may not like the stretch, and here's what we said too. You say, I don't like piecing all that together. It's only 4 references, right? Genesis 38, Deuteronomy 23, Ruth 4, Psalm 51:5. It's only 4 things. Your other option is you let Psalm 51:5, Psalm 51:5, you let Psalm 51:5 contradict a whole host of other Bible passages, and you cannot do that. Okay, we covered some of these alleged contradictions. We opened up, we said, hopefully Ruth will help us stop complaining so much it could be worse. It educates us on the idea of what constitutes a marriage, and it gets us out of this mess that the government has put us in. Now, here's what I want to do. This is what I've been working towards. Why do you think that Ruth is in your Bible? Number 2, things that we know we often don't know as we ought to know. And some people didn't know why I was doing Ruth today when I did Judges 4 and 5 last time. I think, y'all, that this is exactly the way that we're supposed to study Ruth. I think that we're supposed to be mid-study judges, and I think that we're supposed to hit pause on the book of Judges, and we're supposed to bring Ruth over into it, and we are supposed to see something absolutely, like I talk about classic literature. The Bible is classic literature in the way that it does unfold its story to us. Ruth is there to show you what God can be working on behind the scenes. You remember we started out the book of Judges and we said people say this? Judges was one of the worst times in Israel's history. Well, you take Ruth 1:1. Ruth is in the time when the judges ruled, and you put Ruth in the first 3 chapters and you say Judges was one of the darkest times in Israel's history, and this is what you see. You see God behind the scenes working on a plan that would redeem all those people who had faith, would redeem the people who had faith and us today. Do you get what I'm saying here? When you're looking at Judges and you say, boy, it's all doom and gloom, it's one thing going wrong right after the next, it's just an awful time frame, and here's my point. You are supposed to read Judges, and I'm saying read Judges the way that it is. It's some bad stuff. But put Ruth in there, and that is basically going to be your ray of light. This is all going to be taken care of. Like we said, you shouldn't be complaining so much anyways. I shouldn't be complaining so much anyways. But good things can be taking shape during the worst times, and we should learn to be optimistic about those time frames. So here's what I'm saying, y'all. You know, we talked a couple weeks ago on a nighttime broadcast, and I quoted the man Charles Finney, who basically is known in history for religious revivalism. And Charles Finney said that revival implies a current or a previous state of sleep. Y'all, religion in America is like getting put through the ringer right now. And you know what? Someone says, it's bad. Yeah, it's bad, but I have said let's be optimistic about it. We might have just experienced a Matthew chapter 13 type of thing, tares getting taken away from the wheat. We should never, and Matthew 25, goats taken away from the sheep. We should never be upset about goats being removed from the sheep. That's not a bad thing. But here's what I'm saying, y'all. We might be in just a moment of history where people are adverse and opposed to what they call organized religion, opposed to the Bible, and we might be moving into a realm like we have looked into our history and said, people just all of a sudden became interested. Whether you want to call it the Second Great Awakening, and then people have a romanticized idea about the Great Depression and people's interest in Bible study. Well, you know what? If it's the case that people became interested in Bible study after the Great Depression, it took the Great Depression to get them there. And so we should be looking at this and saying, you know what? Yeah, they were going through some rough stuff in the time frame of Judges, but God is behind the scene, and He's making good things happen, and that's how we should be looking at it today. But here's the point, y'all. I've said this before about providence. I don't think that God just works providence like with these random folk. I think that God takes people who He says they can get the job done, and they get the job done. Boaz and Ruth were being the type of people that they needed to be. Do you get what I'm saying? Boaz goes out in the field and he sees a woman working with the men, and he has an idea of Exodus 21:7. He says, I don't know about this. And so he starts telling the men multiple occasions, do not touch this woman. He's protecting her when she basically had no value. He could have looked at her and said, he could have in his mind full well, I'll turn a blind eye. I'll turn a blind eye if they start messing with her. But he doesn't. He looks at a stranger and he says, we're going to treat her well. And then you take Ruth, and she has left her homeland and all of her people behind, and she says, I'm going to follow the God of Israel. Here's my thing. Things might be hard right now, but here's my question to you. What are you doing to fix them? You're not going to fix them if you're not the Bible student you need to be. Like, it's not going to be opportunity presents itself to you, and you just, I feel like I can do it now. No. You have to be consistently getting ready for when opportunity does present itself. And in the meantime, here's the thing too, why would anybody listen to some of these people who say they're going to like make things happen? I don't think it works this way. Let's look at Matthew 7. Matthew 7 verse number 20. You are in a congregation and you see stuff going on that should not be going on. Whatever it might be. You might say, okay, that's vague. You figure it out. But you're somebody who has no fruit, and one day you just stand up and say, brethren, I don't think that we should be doing X, Y, Z. And they're going to look at you and they're going to say, what do you have to replace it with? And you say, I thought you would tell me. It doesn't work that way. If you yourself are a do-nothing member of the congregation, but you got ideas, ain't nobody listening to that. Everybody's got ideas, but they're not contributing anything. Do you see what I'm saying? At some point, fruit does come in. Matthew 7:20, and here's what I heard recently. Don't get me wrong. You might stand up and say we shouldn't be doing X, Y, Z, and you're absolutely right. You may not need to be doing X, Y, Z. But I did hear a man the other day, and he was being hard on a fellow brother, and what he said was correct. But my question back is, I said, when has that person ever been in a position where they had to make decisions? It's easy for people who never have to make decisions to tell everybody else, you're making the wrong decisions. Well, how about we let you start making some calls? They don't want to do that. Why? Because they don't want to start taking the criticism of everybody else who's doing nothing but got something to say. We need to be producing fruit right now. What am I talking about? We need to be the Bible students that we need to be. And I'm talking about really getting into your Bible study, studying the text, getting a concordance, doing serious word studies. And I would say to you, you should invest in Kittle's Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, doing real word studies, investing in debate books. Man, y'all, I got to tell you, I had a Baptist text me yesterday, and he was asking me to help him talk to Jehovah's Witnesses. Do you know how many people inside the Lord's church don't talk to Jehovah's Witnesses, and a Baptist is texting me telling me that he's trying to talk to Jehovah's Witnesses? We have opportunity all over the place. When Jehovah's Witnesses came to our door, we said, come in. When they got ready to leave, we said, can you come back? And we had a 6-week study with them. It took them 6 weeks for them to finally say, we don't want any more of this. And I said, when they said that, I said, I want to note this. Y'all are saying it's time to stop, not me. And they said, we get it. You have so much opportunity. You have so much potential. And I'm here saying that I really do believe in you. You don't have to have a PhD. You don't have to have a bachelor's degree. What you have to do is be an outgoing person. You have to be a conversationalist. Like I said, Mark and I go golfing, and a lot of people would say that was Mark and my time to relax, take a breather. And what did Mark do? When we got tied up with this guy we're golfing, we're all talking Bible now on the golf course. And you say, I don't golf. You have opportunities all over the place where you can be talking Bible to people. If you're reading Ruth, God can take horrible situations, and y'all been complaining about 2020, take horrible situations and make something fantastic out of it. But I'm saying, y'all, we got to be ready to play the part inside of Providence. Maybe, here's another thing that you have to think about. They're in Judges. Ruth and Boaz get together, and they're part of the seed line of Christ. I do have to say this. Were they playing their part? Yes. Did that necessarily fix their problems immediately? No. They still had to play the part. You and I need to play our part right now, which is take advantage of the times, talk Bible to people, be outgoing, make ourselves, Philippians 2:15, we need to be good examples of the Christian religion as we live in this crooked nation and generation. We got to do that, but we have to recognize we might be playing our part doesn't mean it's going to be fixed by next year. We might need to be thinking ahead for like the long haul. It's going to be looking like this for a while. I don't know. When I read Ruth, I basically think to myself, I shouldn't be trying to even think of those type of things. Like how long? What's this going to look like? I just need to play my part. And I need to do it to the best of my ability. Are you even playing your part? I'm asking you this question, y'all. Surely, if we're saying that Moabite and an unknown person named Boaz, good things can come out of nowhere from the most unlikely players and characters. You do not have to be a full-time preacher to teach lost souls. You do not have to be an elder in the church to be a good Bible student. You can be getting things done. Now, we'll tell you this. One of the big ways that you could help get things done is you could be telling people about what does the Bible say. If you be honest with me and me with you, you know that what does the Bible say is one of the only places that is going to give people the truth point blank the way that we do. Not beating around the bush, giving it to them straightforward within an hour's time frame, on the nighttime broadcast and then going through the Bible in the morning broadcast to just give what the Bible teaches. You got lost family members, tell them about what does the Bible say. We get contacts from these people all the time who are watching the broadcast and they are learning. You could be sharing the Informer with people. Email me at calebgrobertson@gmail.com. They could be getting all this information. You know, I'm writing this for Christians, but there's a lot of people, they're not Christians, but they also have an idea that God is so unmerciful that they say, why would I be a Christian? I got people who are saying, like, you ought to be writing this paper such and such way. You ought to get your own paper and write it how you want to do it. I want people, Romans 2:4, to know that the goodness of God leads you to repentance. Are you playing your part? Don't say, that's what we pay the preacher to do. Do your job and do it well. Make this your life passion. You're invested in so much other stuff that's never going to satisfy you. Why do you have to go through it first? Like, you're going to hear me say, you're doing things, life hobbies and life purpose, that's not going to satisfy you, and you're going to spend the next 10 years, and at some point you're going to say, maybe Caleb was right. I'm going to say the Bible is right, that this should be your life passion, life focus. I think I'm out of time and I have to go. Again, as we go out, let your friends know about What Does the Bible Say? Johnny Robertson YouTube. This is what will come up. They can watch it live. They can watch all the archive shows. If you're in Martinsville, visit with us at 823 Starling Avenue. If you're in Danville, visit with the Church of Christ at 120 American Legion Boulevard, right off of North Main. And then again, email me at calebgrobertson@gmail.com. Love you. Appreciate this opportunity. Come back tonight. We'll have more Bible study on Ruth, and then come back tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Have a good rest of the day. Keep asking, what does the Bible say?